Hello friends, today I want to share a story called Jack's Garden by Henry Cole. This is a story about a kid just like you that had the good idea to create a garden. Let's find out how he grew this garden. This is the garden that Jack planted. Look at this. Just dirt. There's an apple tree over here. Jack has tools like hoses, watering cans, hose, shovels, pruning shears, garden claws, trowels, and rakes. Tools make the job easier, but he's got a big blank area to create a world. He's got his friendly kitty friend to help him with this important job. I wonder what Jack's gonna plant. Now we saw that big brown area of soil, or what we call dirt. But when we look beneath the dirt, when we dig down with our shovels, there's a whole nother world that is a home for so many animals. This is the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. We see all kinds of worms tunneling down underground. We see different insects that have laid their eggs or are growing underground and will emerge from their tunnels when they're ready to live above ground. Many animals make their homes underground. Here we see a star-nosed mole, a very interesting animal that rarely comes to the surface. As we learn more about trees and different habitats, we'll find a lot of amazing animals that have very special homes underground. These are the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. And look at all the amazing seeds that Jack planted. He's made rows to drop those seeds in and then cover them with a blanket of soil. We see purple coneflowers, that's a kind of daisy. We see lupines, oh, I love lupines. Foxglove, that's that fairy lantern plant that's so beautiful. Asters, which we plant so that they can bloom in the fall to provide a good meal for our bee buddies. There's our black-eyed Susan. Remember, we're going to plant a black-eyed Susan in the storybook garden too. We see clover. Clover is such an important plant for our bee buddies. They love that sweet clover. We have yarrow, lupines, wildflowers of all kinds. We learned about those wildflowers that grow and provide food for so many bees and butterflies and insects and birds in the prairie and other areas too. We see coreopsis, daisies, morning glories, sunflowers, and some of these flowers that Jack's planting are super important for butterflies. We see milkweed seeds. Milkweed is the only plant that monarch butterfly caterpillars can eat during their transformation, called a metamorphosis. No milkweed, no monarch butterflies. We see sunflowers, which provide food for so many animals, including squirrels and birds and people too. We see poppy seeds. Hollyhock seeds are both a host and nectar plant. Host plants are for the caterpillars. Nectar plants are for animals to get that sweet nectar that they need for energy. So lots of amazing variety of flowers that Jack is planting. This is the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. And we see all kinds of different clouds in the sky. This rain is super important because it will soak those seeds and cause them to plump up and crack open. We call that germination. When the hard seed coat on the seed cracks open, then the baby plant that's sleeping inside can stretch up toward the sun, and the roots will grow down into the soil and anchor the little plant into the ground and suck up food and water from the soil. Remember, inside every seed is a baby plant sleeping, just waiting for the right time to grow. We don't want them to start growing in the middle of the winter around here. It would be too cold and not enough sunlight, so the little baby would die. So it just sleeps the winter away. We call that dormant. And look at, oh my goodness, these are the seedlings that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. So here we see that little seed that is cracked open, germinated, and the roots grow down, and a little stem grows up, and here are the two little seed leaves that were curled up sleeping inside that little seed all along. It's so exciting. And we see, as we look along those different rows of seeds, many different type of plants. Each one has its own special leaves and sizes that they'll grow to be based on their parent plants. We see this mother robin pulling a juicy worm to feed her babies. We see different insects that have moved into the garden habitat. Once you plant a garden, many animals will move in and make it their special home. These are the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. And look at the amazing variety of life. These are just a few of the animals that live in the garden. We have a garter snake, praying mantis, stink bug, firefly, what we call a lightning bug, lacewing. Here we have a swallowtail larva, which will grow up into a beautiful swallowtail butterfly. Here we see a goldenrod spider and an argiope spider, an orb weaver. These are the buds that formed on the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. Oh, look at that. So the mother ladybug, we see lots of ladybugs all around the border of these pages. And when we look at the underside of leaves, often we'll see eggs that animals laid. These are ladybug or lady beetle, ladybird beetle eggs. And those lady beetles will hatch into lady beetle larvae. Here we see them until they grow big enough to become an adult butterfly. Here we see lots of buds, all different shapes and sizes of buds that are baby flowers that haven't opened yet. These are really cool. These are poppy buds. And when the buds get big enough, they'll uncurl their petals and send out their sweet smell to attract their pollinator pals. And look at, these are the flowers that blossom from the buds that formed on the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. Look at, they have the black-eyed Susans just like we're going to plant in our garden. So exciting. Here we have clover, we have asters, lupines, wild geraniums, yarrow, mullein, coreopsis, bee balm, a favorite of our bee buddies, violets, daisies, pinks, what we call dianthus, bluets, and fleabane. The bees love fleabane. It's a very, very good source of food for them. These are the insects that sip nectar from the flowers, that blossom from the buds, that formed on the plants, that grew from the seedlings, that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. Here we see those beautiful cone flowers here's this swallowtail butterfly that not too long ago was that caterpillar. Look at, he transformed from this caterpillar into this beautiful swallowtail butterfly. Now all these pollinators help the flowers to produce those seeds. Those seeds will become food for animals like birds and squirrels and things, and the seeds will fall to the ground and plant new flowers to help provide food for all of these amazing animals too. Here's our little bees. There's a great variety of bees in our world, but remember, all of these pollinators are in danger in our world, and that's why it's super important that we plant as many flowers as we can to help them get a good meal. Then they will fly to our food crops and help us get a good meal. We help each other live and grow and live happy lives on Mother Earth. These are the birds that chase the insects, that sip nectar from the flowers, that blossom from the buds, that formed on the plants, that grew from the seedlings, that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden that Jack planted. Look at all these sunflowers. Those sunflower seeds are a favorite of so many birds and squirrels and chipmunks and people too. What an important gift. And here we see so many little baby birds hatching from their eggs. Such a happy day in the garden. And this is the garden that Jack planted. Jack had his good idea to plant a garden, and with a little hard work and seeds, sunshine and rain, Jack's seeds that he planted grew until they created a paradise for all these animals to make their home. I think Jack had a very good idea, and I think he's a superhero for Mother Earth, and you can be too because of the gift of seeds.